I'm going to turn it over to Nicole, who has much more exciting things to say.
Hi, everyone. I would like to welcome Greg and Amy to the panel. I'll start with some fun introductions. So, Neri is a storyteller, artist, and author of award-winning books for teens and kids, including the Coretta Scott King honor-winning book Yummy, The Last Days of a South Side Shorty. Other books include True and Now, Ghetto Cowboy, and graphic novels such as Grand Theft Horse. In 2017, Neri was awarded a National Science Foundation grant where he was able to visit Antarctica. He has also created and produced films and has taught animation to teens. His book Ghetto Cowboy was recently adapted into a Netflix film called Concrete Cowboy. He currently lives and writes from Florida. A.S. King is the author of award-winning young adult novels, including Dig, which won the 2020 Michael L. Prince Award. Other novels include Ask the Passengers and I Crawl Through It. A.S. King is a mental health advocate, especially focusing on mental health of young people. She spent a significant amount of time living in Ireland, where she restored a farm, but now she resides in Pennsylvania. Her newest mind-bending surrealist novel is Switch, which just came out on May 11th. So happy release week, A.S. King. Welcome to the panel.
Yes.
And then I'll start with the first question for both of you. So before we talk about writing outside of your genre, what do you consider your genre to be?
Ooh. Oh, go, Greg. You go.
Well, on one hand, I could say perhaps I'm known for my more urban books, which feature young Black men and first person dialect. But on the other hand, all of my books are kind of inspired by real life. So my editor was saying to me last night, to me, real life is like a candy store, and so everywhere I look are like stories. I'm just like, ooh, that looks good. That looks good. So to me, outside my genre is a pretty wide spectrum.
Yeah. I don't know what my genre is. I mean, I guess I'm a surrealist. But, in the early days, we didn't say that, right? Because it didn't fit or it didn't work or it was too weird. So people would say magic realism. That doesn't fit because of what the main definition of that is. So I guess I'll say I'm a surrealist, but that kind of carries through to everything. So that's weird. I don't know if that's a genre versus a style, right? So and I don't think young adult is a genre either. So I'll say my genre is weird. How about that? But I'll also say, no, usually, I'm usually writing about families. I'm usually writing about young people who are trying to face a thing and escape a thing or free themselves from a thing. Yeah, that's not a genre either.
Yeah. I mean, I would say part of your genre is just like I was saying earlier, is being out there. Like there's nothing you could write that would possibly surprise me unless it was like completely boring and kind of.
I'm going to write a note. Surprise, Greg. Yeah.
So I expect like you to be out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I don't know if how about, okay, so my genre then would be like literary fiction, which is like boring name for what I do. But like, I guess that would work. I don't know. I mean, there is poetic language.
How about emotional fiction?
Emotional fiction. I'm all about the emotions this week, that's for sure, and every day since I was born. So yeah, maybe. And maybe that's a good way to put it, because I've just recently, somebody referred to Louise Glick, her poetry, as emotional poetry, which I thought was interesting. I was like, I didn't know that existed. Maybe there's a place for me in poetry.
Yeah. And actually, that emotional thing ties in with me too, because I realized, because I'm always surprised by who's reading my books. And I realized early on that, if you tell the emotional story, the thing that everybody universally connects to, meaning we all know what it is to feel love and hate and fear and joy and all these different emotions. Like the surface things could be completely different than your life, but if you can connect to the emotional story, then anybody can relate to your character. And I didn't know I was doing that until like I had some experiences that showed me like these people who I thought could not possibly understand this book, like would get it in the deepest way.
Well, I mean, and that's everything like that. And that's what I teach like at grad school. I mean, this is the point. You have to be able to emotionally grab your reader. And it's interesting because my eldest daughter, Gracie, her favorite book was Yummy. And Yummy, like, look, Gracie grew up on a farm in Ireland and in the middle of 50 acres of woods in Pennsylvania. She's a white girl. She's never been in an urban situation. She's never been in a situation like Yummy was in at all. And yet that book emotionally resonated with her and still sits here on her bookshelf. And it's just, it was her #1 book for years and years and years. And it was because of the emotional resonance. It was the idea of a mistake made. It was the idea of a you know, being pushed into a just having impossible, feeling like, I think the feeling, she connected to the feeling of being put in an impossible position due to her own issues, right? Like, so I think that that's something that always connected with her. And there she was completely different. And it's so funny you say that, because for me too, like my books, like I have books about people that like, they're going through something completely different, but I get a letter that says, this spoke to me. And I'm like, okay, that's brilliant. That was the point, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So here, okay. So I want to talk about genre just a little bit, right?
Okay.
So like recently I was asked to write a short story, a hard science fiction short story. And I don't know if the people asking me understood that I started in hard science fiction, like that they were awful stories, Greg. They were so bad. So bad. Because for trying to find your feet as a surrealist, that's fun. But you know, my world building was weak. You know, there were certain things that were weak, but now that I went and attempted to write this story, like probably 25 years since I wrote those awful stories, I realized my world building is still weak. You know, these sorts of things are still, you know, funny, right? You don't change. But what I ended up realizing is that I truly do lean on my own experiences. And I found it really interesting what you said in the beginning, that you're inspired by real life, but it seems that you're inspired by things that you see.
Yes.
So can you talk to me about, like, I'm going to name one just because it's probably on a lot of our minds. Like, what was the inspiration? When did you first find out about what inspired Ghetto Cowboy, which eventually inspired Concrete Cowboy?
Yeah, I mean, all my books start when I stumble across something I never knew about. You know, there's literally a moment, and maybe somebody says something, or maybe I hear something on the radio, or I see a documentary, or I read something, or I see a photo. And Ghetto Cowboy started with a photo that somebody sent me, and it was this young Black kid standing on the back of a horse in what clearly was like the inner city. And it was kind of like, what is this, you know? And then there were a few more photos, and it was like Black cowboys in Philadelphia, like what? And then so that's kind of like makes me want to find out more, and that's when I start digging. And then the more I dig, the more incredible it seemed. Like it just gets better and better, and until the point where it's like, dang, I want to read that book, but nobody has written it, you know? And so it's kind of like, when nobody has written it and I can't stop thinking about it, and I keep thinking like, what? Then I know it's like that's a perfect world that hasn't been told before. And there's a great story in there, even if I don't know what it is yet. It's like a perfect setting, and like the voice coming from that place or that community or those people are really unique. And so that combination of things kind of lures me in, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's like always happens, like literally. So there's that saying, you should write what you know about, but I like to write about all the things I don't know about. Right. So that's.
But in the process, you get to know about them, because you couldn't have written that book without doing, you know, really serious research.
The point is also that I recently discovered, it's like when I write, I'm not writing from the point of authority, like, okay, I'm the expert on horses in the inner city, so here's how it is. I'm writing as a person, just like the reader. I don't know anything. And so I feel like I'm discovering this world with the reader. And so they are surprised in the same places that I'm surprised, right? So that my surprise translates into their surprise.
Do you plot, or do you when you write?
No, I jump in. I'm very intuitive, you know, like once I have a world and some characters start to emerge, you know, there's a basic sense of what the story's about. But generally I start writing and the characters kind of take over, and I feel more like a documentary filmmaker where I'm following them. And occasionally I will throw in, you know, obstacles like, I wonder what the worst thing that could happen right now would be, and how would they react? And then I'll do it. But I don't know how they're going to react. And so I think the story's going this way, but then it starts to go like, where are they going? I thought we were going this. No, well, let's go that way then. So by the end, I'm totally surprised, you know,
Awesome.
like how did this book happen?
Awesome. That's kind of cool, right? Because I mean, we come at
Yeah.
things from different ways, and you'd think that like, because I come from like, I don't for me, it's always like little snippets of my own stuff, right? That starts it and starts the thing. So it's not like
Right.
like self-involved stuff. It's like a little thing. Like one time when I was outside, it was nighttime, and I was sitting on a picnic table, and I looked up, and I saw an airplane go by, and I sent love to it because I've been doing that since I was about 5 or 6 years old. And I thought, hey, that's a cool story idea. What will I do with that? And just like you're, you know, this guy on the back of a horse, I walked around with that for a while, and I thought, I wonder what kind of person would do that? Why would someone do that? Of course, it was me, but I wasn't asking me, why did you do that? I was like, if I immediately put it into someone else and go, you know, why would I do that? And then same, and then I end up just following the characters through, and then figuring out, you know, what's the worst thing that could happen to them, and then making them go through that thing. And
Right.
Same deal. When at the end, I'm like, how'd this happen? I don't know how this happened,
So
but it
you
came from
like literally feel your way. I mean,
literally.
like you just open yourself up and go,
It's
and
pure
you don't
emotional.
worry about like, where is this going? Or this doesn't make sense. Or
Nope.
like, who are these people?
No, I mean, if anything, it's a puzzle, right? Like, it's funny. Corey McCarthy up at VCFA did a lecture, and he talked about his childhood method, and how, in a way, a lot of us creative people, we do what we did when we were kids. We follow our childhood method. Sorry, not our creative method, our childhood method. So for me as a kid, like, I loved puzzles. So I loved long division. Dude, if I was talking nonstop in the back of the car, someone would hand me a legal tablet with a giant long division problem, and I would just shut up and do the long division. I love puzzles. And so, and at the time I loved math. I still kind of love math, but not that much.
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, I do see stories. I do talk about them as puzzles, and sometimes, you know, the pieces line up, and other times you're like trying to force that piece to go there, but it doesn't quite fit.
Yeah,
you know, that's when you have to like, okay, let's start over. Maybe we should.
But sometimes it's like I remember right in the beginning of I Crawl Through It, and I mean, it's still there. It's like Gustav is building a helicopter. The helicopter's invisible except on Tuesdays, and it's also red. And I remember sitting there looking at those sentences going, oh, really? Well, that's interesting. I don't know what that means. And that, like, where does that even come from? Actually, those sentences were me talking about the frustration with the publishing business. That's what that really was. And then I was like, but who's Gustav? What's with the helicopter? Is it really invisible? And those were all the puzzle questions. And I figured I couldn't answer that. I had to write the book to find out what the answer was. And it's sort of, it almost forces me to do it. It's frustrating, but it also works. And it's also really kind of invigorating at the same time to find an answer and to make an invisible helicopter possible, which is funny because if you can see that right there, that is the helicopter, and it's not Tuesday.
Cool. Nice. I wanted to go back to a word that you mentioned a little while ago, genre, because I like using genre. Like, I came out of movies, and so movie genre, when I write a book, I'm thinking in terms of movie genres, even if it's not that. So like I did a book called well, even like Grand Theft Horse, right? It's a horse story, a woman and a horse, but I saw it as a bank heist movie, right? So bank heist movie, you always start in the middle of the bank heist and things just are going wrong. And right before the title hits, like something, there's a moment like, oh man. And then it cuts and it's like 2 months earlier. And then you kind of start the story and then you build up back to that point. And then when you hit that point, it's totally different than what you thought the first time you saw it. And then you kind of keep going. So sometimes, yeah, I like to use genre techniques or genre shapes to shape a story, especially if it's not that. Like if I did do a bank heist movie, it wouldn't be shaped like a bank heist movie, right?
Right, it wouldn't, and that's the thing about you, Neri.
Yeah,
That's the thing about you, and it's kind of, I think it's kind of cool that you come from a background where there is structure, where there is genre, where there are categories, and you have to fit
yeah,
into that. Otherwise, it's not going, the movie's not going to get made. Like, it's a business, but you
right,
have to be very serious about that. Because I came into this as a total lula. I came in going, here's some words, and then I'm like, they don't fit on any shelf. What is it? I don't know. And I had no idea, which is why, part of the reason why it took me so long to get published, and then, which is, makes sense. Like, here I have a product, but I don't know who it's for. Who's going to buy that? Nobody. Because I didn't have a footing in genre, even though I read like sci-fi, or I read, certain.
But because of that, you came up with your totally unique genre.
That's it.
So going back to the beginning, like this idea of what is the Amy King genre, it's that kind of unspeakable thing that you unknowingly invented, which is
Yeah.
the Amy King story, or the approach to a story, right?
Yeah.
Which
And
like nobody else could do just because they're not you.
Yeah, and it's really weird, and then it's weird because I don't see it as singular. Like, people are like, "Oh, that's so great." I'm like, I think it makes me weird, and like with the smelly girl on the bus. But it's also like, I'm like, oh, this is probably working out for me at this point. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I think this is okay, and I still like, this is how I write books. Look, this is my next book. It's a Post-it note. It says the
Cool.
word system. There's a hamster tube and a chair. That's all you need to know. Now I have the whole book in my head. I know what that means.
Totally
You don't know what
in
that
for
means.
that.
I know.
You're
right?
like 2 words: hamster and chair.
Hamster and
Boom.
chair. So it's kind of interesting. Like, and yet, like, this is kind of, in a way, though, I think about the childhood me. I go back to the childhood method, and who am I? Right? What am I doing? I got one shot on this earth, one shot, and especially now in my life, I'm going to live it 3 times harder than I did before. Like, and then I was already living pretty hard, so I'm going for it. And if I'm going to do it, I want to do it my way. I remember being a certain age and being like, what is with these tights and these tight shoes? I don't like these shoes. They don't feel nice on my feet. Forget it. I'm wearing Chuck Taylors, and I'm not wearing tights, and I'm wearing a pair of jeans, and you know what I mean? And I'm wearing a t-shirt, and then I'm going to cut my hair short. And if everybody says I look like a boy, I don't care, because I'm going to go catch tadpoles after school. And I just stopped caring because I had so many people, because of the family, my family of origin, my folks were great, but I always had criticism, always telling me that I wasn't fitting in. So since a very young age, I was just sort of like fingers up, like, yeah, look, this is me. And so it kind of bled into how I do my job. And I love that. Like, the older I get, the more I really appreciate it,
I mean,
Even though it's still weird.
going to the second part of the title, but I love the idea of defying expectations, So I like going against whatever people expect me to do next. I like throw something at them, like, and they're like, what? And that's like
True
one
and
of my
Nell.
favorite things to do.
True and Nell did that to me. I was like,
Yeah.
What's Neri doing with True and Nell? I like this. And then I checked it out. I was like, dang, he's just, one thing that you're consistent, doesn't matter what genre you're working in, you're exceptional. You're so good at what you do, Greg. And you don't have to take the compliment. It's cool, be all shy. But you are really, really great at it. And somebody asked in the comments about, I'm going to ask it to you. How is writing a graphic novel different to writing a novel for you? And then we're going to talk about writing for different age groups.
I mean, to me, it's like technique, like story is story, but you're using different tools to tell it. So, I mean, I think of it the same way, regardless of what physically, whether it's a novel or graphic novel or poem, it's still like a story. And part of it comes from, like, again, defying expectations, like Grand Theft Horse. The easiest thing in the world would have been to write it as one of these inspirational nonfiction books. Like, there's a whole section in Barnes and Noble which are like about people and their animals and some inspiring real life story, right? That would have been the easiest thing in the world. I could have done it. So, but it's like, that's not fun. Like, what's the most unusual way to do it? And I thought, like, my cousin Gail, I thought of her kind of like a superhero, in a way. And so I thought, well, superheroes have their own comics. And so that's kind of where that came. So it comes out of the subject matter.
Okay.
I thought she needs her own comic book.
Oh, I have to write that on a Post-it note. Anyone watching who knows me knows what this means. This goes
so
on
it's
the
really
wall.
like, a lot of time the story tells me what thing it is. Like, I may think it's a novel, but the story says, no, I'm going to be a graphic novel, or I'm going to be a free verse picture book or whatever. So I'm very kind of open to, I try not to impose myself as a writer, like, okay, this is what it's going to be. Like, I have no idea what it's going to be.
Right.
So I have to listen to it, you know, and then it slowly emerges and I help it come out into the world, you know.
Well, you just helped me because I'm in the middle of trying to write a graphic memoir or two, and I can't figure it out, even though I have the format. I shouldn't say I'm trying to. I have other projects I have to do. I'm dreaming of it. But the superheroes get their own comic book is a really cool thing for me to have right there.
I mean, I just went through this whole process with the book I'm just finishing now, which is my big Antarctica book, which is the first book I'm writing where I'm actually in it, like as the main character, right? And it started off as this gigantic graphic novel, but it was like it was so big and so dense, and it was really good, but it was so overwhelming, like it didn't resonate. Like your brain had too many things in it. And so I spent the last 3 years like simplifying the idea, changing it, trying this. Meanwhile, I'm giving all these talks to schools and having all these slides, and there's a picture and I'm telling a story, and you literally see the expression on the kid's face. Like, so you're getting instant feedback on what's like great or not, you know. Right. And then I just started playing with my PowerPoint slide literally, and my PowerPoint slide became the book. You know.
Sweet. Okay.
And then I added all kinds of things, comics and illustrations and photographs and, you know, story. Like it's like my Antarctic journal in a way, but using all this stuff.
But that's the thing. It's not a straight, and that the story wasn't going to be just a straight graphic novel or a straight graphic memoir.
I literally wasn't thinking like this is now an official product. I was just doing it for fun.
Yeah.
Because this is interesting. And then I showed it to my agent, and he was like, you know, he had that reaction. I mean, he talks a lot, but he was kind of like silent because I didn't know what it was. And it's like, is this interesting at all? I didn't know.
And were you doing your own sketches? Do you draw?
No, well, I do draw, but I'm working with the illustrator from Grand Theft Horse.
Okay, cool. Great.
But I was curious, like your new book, because I know we're both working on books our new books roughly at the same time. And we were both kind of stuck relatively the same time, like ready to give up on it. And I had this weird moment. I was wondering like how you went from being stuck to unsticking and then it suddenly like writing again.
I mean, we were stuck, I think, for two different reasons as well. Like my brain was definitely stuck in certain ways, and I was dealing with a lot of trauma day to day in my life. So I was kind of trying to get over that. But legit, as a writer, I was sort of stuck. I had the words. I had some time. I didn't have a huge amount of time that was, you know, like free to me. But what actually unstuck me was, for the first time too, after 26 novels or something, I pulled out one of those big flip chart pieces of paper, right? And I got out some markers, and it's right there, but I'm not going to show it to you. But it's just sort of like, I ended up almost flow charting the novel, but not really. It's like, again, it was an Amy invention. It just sort of was like, these are the things that are going, here's all the moving parts, and what do I do? So I visually organized it. And I do, it's funny, I have this here, so I can show you this. Visual organization helps me a lot. It's like math.
Yeah.
So then I end up putting it onto like tables of contents like this. That, you know, that like help me understand it. But I mean, honestly, I think a lot of it was just sort of playing sports. This sounds really weird, but playing sports and being a jock when I was a kid helps me in my writing, because I become a real hard ass coach at a certain point. And I'm like, Sarek, sit down and write the freaking book. And I start yelling at myself, and it's perfect. Because even if I write garbage for 2 days, then I can get the garbage out of my head, and then I keep going. But a lot of it was also creating a nice, safe bubble. I meditate a lot. I have quite a great practice of meditation going in my life. And I started doing this meditation to make a safe bubble, specific to writing, a specific writing bubble. And if I'm having trouble, I make my writing bubble.
So did your inner voice coach go from being a sports coach to being a meditation type yogi coach?
He said, hey, Amy, play your best game ever today.
Today we're
Drop
gonna
your
write.
shoulders. Yeah. So, kind of, yeah, actually, Greg, I started to forgive myself a little bit.
Yeah.
I started to, because I was in the position I was in, going through some really serious stuff emotionally and mentally. I was like, hey, maybe you should forgive yourself and cut yourself some freaking slack, which you've been doing for everybody else your whole life. Your whole life, you've been cutting everybody else slack, and you don't cut yourself any slack. Maybe it's time. And so, yeah, the last year has been quite a big year of just sort of changing my mindset, which is great. And in my little bubble. But yeah, how did you get out? What changed you?
Well, I'd been working it on this book, the sequel to Ghetto Cowboy, for like off and on for 5 years, and I had written a big chunk of it, and it was really good, but I realized it was going to be twice as long as the original, which you can't do because there was just too much stuff. So I thought, okay, well, I'll start over and I'll just simplify it. And then the same thing happened. Like I wrote a big chunk of it, and it was like still going to be twice as long. And then I kept thinking, I just had too much to write about, so I just put it away. And then I was like, I'd already pre-sold it. And then I had an opportunity to go away on a retreat by myself, and I had like 7 days. And I thought, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write the whole thing in 7 days. I won't care. Like, I'll deliberately write it bad. I'll throw everything out, like my stack of notes and everything I ever knew. Whatever's good will stay in my brain, and everything else is gone. And I'll just start writing, and I won't ever stop. I won't say, well, this is horrible. I'll revel in how bad it is. Like, I'm just going to go for it. Like, it would be cool, like this would be cool, but that makes no sense. I don't care, it's cool. Or this would be fun, like, yeah, but how are you gonna set that up? I don't care, we're just gonna do it. And I just did that the whole way through and kind of reveled how bad it was. And then when I got to the end, I was like, well, that was something. I doubt it's gonna be good. And then later when I read it, it actually all worked.
Wow.
Because I just let everything go. And I was ready, I already had given up, so.
Wow, I'm writing another post-it note. Let everything
So that was
go.
a very unusual, like that had never happened, but that also has to do with forgiving yourself. Like you're trying too hard, you're trying to make it worthy, you're trying to make it this, you're trying to make it that. Once you throw all that away and just don't care anymore, you just let it rip and just have fun with it, then you could rediscover it again. And so that was like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I love that. And I do that too. Like sometimes, and it's funny, I think that's what's going to end up when you work, especially when you work for more than a few years on a project over here, right? So you're doing this other stuff because you have contracts or because you're doing them or whatever, they need sequels, whatever's happening over here, you're doing it. But you've got this here and you're building, and suddenly it's too big, you've got too much information. And I love that you're right. If it's good, it's going to stick with you. And I think the good stuff does stick with us. And that's exactly it.
So one thing I wanted to ask you about, because talk about writing outside your genre, you have recently written for middle grade, and we were talking about this last time, like how middle grade is my sweet spot and YA is your sweet spot. And so you have a different reaction to writing middle grade.
Yeah, I do.
I do, and I have a different reaction perhaps to writing YA.
Yeah.
So I was curious, like, did you feel like you were writing outside of your, way?
I still do. I mean, I'll show you. Look, this is what I have to do for middle grade. I have to do that. Now, I don't plot
why
books.
is that?
Like, that's crazy. I think it's a mix of, I have a sort of strange low self-esteem about writing for outside of what I'm comfortable with. I mean, I've raised 2 middle graders. You know what I mean? I'm comfortable with that age group. I love middle grade. I love that age group. I just don't know if I don't know if my approach hit, like, I don't know. I can't figure it out.
Could you look at it like I'm just writing a story, but the characters, instead of being 17 are, 13 or whatever?
I guess at the moment, like Z Brewer helped me with this, and I don't know where that post-it note is, but there's somewhere. Oh, it's right there. It says middle grade is emotional, not intellectual. And perhaps that is part of my problem, because I am a pretty heady, like I live in my head and I intellectualize everything from emotions to, you know, everything. And so maybe that's part of it, but also, and that's part of the, like the weave of poetry that I kind of try and write. But what I'm finding is though, and I'm just finding it on this book, and I had better because it's due in a month. And so, actually it's due last September, but it's due in a month now.
Sure.
And what I realized is that I go back to who I was when I was 12 or 11. And that was still the same girl who was set in love to airplanes and had this weird creative brain that nobody really understood. And they all thought I was weird. And I was a smelly girl on the bus with a cello and always in the front seat with the damn cello. But like, I think about her and I think, yeah, she would have liked to read a book where she was lonely, but the meteorite talked to her. And she could talk to the meteorite. And while that's a little weird, yeah, so is she. And so I guess I'm trying to center her when I'm writing middle grade now, but I do find it more difficult. It's definitely more difficult for me. I don't know why. I think it's because it's a little more, it has to be a little more straightforward, and invisible helicopters really wouldn't fly there, no pun intended. Why is young adult, like, explain the opposite, like from your side, like, I don't, like,
Well,
what is it that
I don't
makes
know.
you?
I always say, like, for whatever reason, I feel like my writing brain is stuck at like a 13-year-old boy. And that's,
Okay.
for whatever reason, I just gravitate to that. And I don't know why. I mean, I love talking to middle grade kids. It just comes very naturally. So to write in their voice comes very easy to me. It's not that I don't like writing for, you know, YA, but it's just, that's where I gravitate to.
Right.
Perhaps maybe we should look at some
Let's
questions
look at some
from
questions.
the
I think we just
audience.
accidentally answered 2 of them, which was wonderful. So the
Okay.
first one was about middle grade or different age groups. And we,
Hi, Amy and Greg. You guys are
Yeah.
awesome. It's Pamela speaking here.
what's up, Pamela?
We're having a glitch with the chat. So the people who are joining us can't seem to message us on the chat.
Okay.
Okay.
I did put my cell phone number there. If anybody wants to text a question, I'll pass it through.
Okay.
So we don't really have any questions at the
Okay.
moment.
Well, we can keep going.
Yeah, keep
Greg
going.
and I can talk all
You're doing
day.
a great job.
I got plenty of questions.
So, well,
Yes.
well, I kind of had a question, but I think we kind of answered it. No, go ahead. What do you got there?
I was going to talk about, like, when you write, do you think about your audience, or are you the audience?
Well, Greg, I've learned throughout the years that I kind of was always writing. I've learned that there's a message in all of my books, and I was writing to one person. It wasn't me, although in the end it did end up being me. And then the theme or the idea was, hey, you can change your mind and change your life. It's as easy as flipping a light switch. That comes actually from Vera Dietz, which is funny because this entire book from Switch is about that light switch in a way. But they use a different thing. It's easy as flipping pancakes. So it's always about sort of, can you changing, opening your mind, changing, getting rid of an old mindset and welcoming a new one. It turns out the person in my life never changed, so I had to. And, you know, as crazy as it is, I'm not saying I wrote those books for a person, I didn't, but it was the person I had in mind. And it was actually more than anything, I was watching somebody struggle being completely stuck. And I'm still watching that person struggle being completely stuck. And not just that person, there's a bunch of people in my life that are stuck in like a negative, bad cycle, and they're not going to come out of it. And it makes me sad because I think humans, again, we got one shot. Why not have a great time, or at least find love and relax and fun and stuff like this. And so in the end, I am trying to get a message across to as many people as I can, if that makes sense, although I'm not really trying to be didactic and give anybody a lesson, but I'm trying to help, I guess. And in the end, I ended up helping myself. But no, I don't really have a specific audience in mind other than anybody who needs something, anybody who needs to be told that it's okay to change, and that it's okay if they made mistakes in the past. They can just change and come over on this side and start again. And so it's always been the same, in a way, the same message.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. I think one thing we haven't common is because of the stories we write when we do go to schools. I feel like, and they have read these books, you know, we kind of skip over the formalities of small talk and we just dive straight into like the meaty, you know, juicy stuff.
Yep.
And that because they have read the books, they feel safe to open up and talk about things maybe they haven't told anybody before, like within 10 minutes of me meeting them or you, right?
Yep.
And that's a pretty amazing thing to have people, to know that people trust you enough to open themselves up to you and tell you these things. And it's just like really, really interesting. And you know, it's always in the back of my mind because I've met so many of them over the years now.
I think it goes back to the very first thing you said during this conversation, which is the fact that the emotions run throughout the stories and that they're universal. Because I have absolutely within seconds, I've had people say, come here. And then we go behind the screen or we go up on the stage and they tell me a secret they have told nobody. And now I have just spent the last hour talking to them about trauma and not letting it trip them up and, you know, and opening up to somebody. And then it turns out I'm that somebody. But same, I'll get, you know, and I'm sure you have the same sort of thing. And it's an honor to be invited into a struggle. And to me, it's sort of like to watch someone. And it just happened to an adult actually on my tour. It happened to a fellow writer friend of ours where she shared something that she hadn't shared in 50 or in whatever, 40 years. She'd never shared it with anybody, but she shared it like with me first, just in a chat, but then she shared it the other night, wide open during, you know, a live, what do you call that? A broadcast, Zoom. And I said, how did it feel? And she said, it's gone. I'm light now. I feel better. Like, and I'm just like, oh, that's great. And I mean, if I think that's, I don't know, I think that's a noble thing to do, or a good thing to do. Be able to
Yes.
Sorry, we just had a question come in from one of our participants asking, as authors, do you revisit the books you wrote in the past? And what is that like for you?
Go, Greg.
Once I've written it, particularly when it's, you know, a printed thing, like I never read it again. But, you know, I certainly talk about it. Like I'm still talking, even though Yummy and Ghetto Cowboy are 10 years old or whatever, I talk about it I talk about them in every talk that I give. So they're always with me, even though I haven't read them. I did have to read Ghetto Cowboy because I was doing the sequel, right? So I had to make sure that it matched that book. But otherwise, and that was kind of weird because it was like somebody else had written it because I wrote it so long ago. It's like, hey, this is kind of good. I wonder who wrote this.
That's funny because I'm the same. If once it's between covers, I don't read the books. I have listened to audio. But I've listened to audio, but not a lot or anything. Actually, well, there's one I listen to go asleep on long haul flights. So if I'm going to like Australia or New Zealand, I'll listen to myself read I Crawl Through It because it's my own voice. And I'm like, I'm just going to put myself to sleep because you know, most of us have the same reaction to our own voices. Anyway, but I don't read them either. I often forget things. I'll have students ask me something about Vera Dietz, and I'm like, I don't remember. I wrote that in like 2008. I have no idea, you know, why. But I reread The Dust of 100 Dogs because it got bought by from a publisher to a publisher, and I knew that the beginning of it because I read it out loud, you know, because readings. I read the beginning and it had a present. I'm going to go grammar nerd. It had a present participle phrase in the first page, and I was like, I cannot stand this phrase. I can't believe I wrote this. So I went through and I was able to change like 3 things. And I think I found several. I found like 4 present participle phrases, which really drive me crazy now. So I was able to wipe all of those out. But it was the same deal, Greg. I read it and I was like, oh, this is kind of good. All right. I wrote this in like 1999. Fantastic. I'm glad I got somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, but otherwise, yeah, I mean, because you have to go through so many times. I mean, so many times.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable how many times. Each time is surprising, like how many rounds, not only editorial, but just like copy editing rounds and checking and verifying and just like
like, and when you're finishing a book, Greg, I guarantee you could probably from memory just speak the first page because you've read the first page that many times, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's like, that's one of the biggest questions I get from young people is how many times do you revise? And I'm like, well, when I do it, I used to do it on paper. So that was easy to count because I was typing on a typewriter when I was writing my first books. But this, I mean, every day I start in the beginning sometimes. That's what gets me stuck in a loop. I'm trying to get to page 50 and I just keep reading page 1 to 49 over and over again. And yeah, true. We do read it many times.
Many times.
Many.
I think that's brought us right to 11:45.
Okay.
I just want to thank you both. I feel better about myself when I hear an author say that they don't remember their book as the writer of the book, because I always have that issue as a reader. So that's nice to know.
I have too, Jen. I have the same thing. I have a horrible memory for books and movies.
Yeah, it's the worst. Thank you everybody for logging in today. I am so sorry about the chat. We're trying to figure out what's going on with that. We'll keep doing our best, and I just want to encourage you to check out the other sessions on the website. Greg and Amy are both presenting again, and there's also a ton of other authors. So we will end this session and wish you all a wonderful day.
You guys, thanks for coming. Really great to see you.
Thanks.
Next year, I hope.